Chapter 1. The night was kind to Matthew Dyier. Daylight flattened the world into glare and pain, colors leached thin and brittle, edges dissolving into white noise. But night softened everything. Street lamps dimmed to halos instead of knives, and shadows blurred together in a way his eyes understood. Savannah after dark was a familiar map laid gently over his memory, brick beneath his feet, the slow exhale of the marsh drifting in from the river, cicadas sawing the silence into pieces. Whitley walked to his left, close enough that he could feel her warmth through the thin sleeve of her shirt. She pushed the stroller with Lilith inside, its wheels clicking softly over uneven pavement. Saoirse stayed just ahead, counting steps the way she'd learned to do for him, her small voice whispering numbers under her breath. Morrigan walked beside Thor, one hand resting in the loose fur at the dog's neck. Matthew Jr. skipped in looping circles that made Whitley hiss his name under her breath, while Raymond rode Thor's patience like a throne, toddling forward and back, laughing when the dog's tail brushed his legs. This was their routine. Every night after dinner, before the bugs got too thick and before Lilith's last feeding turned into screaming, they walked. It tired the kids. It settled Matthew's nerves. It reminded them they were still a family and not just people sharing walls. Matthew listened. Footsteps behind them, two adults, steady pace, talking low. A car passing 3 streets over, tires sighing against asphalt. Somewhere a screen door slammed, followed by the hollow clink of a bottle dropped into a recycling bin. Normal sounds. Good sounds. Thor's breathing was even, no tension in the leash. Matthew let himself relax. That was when Morrigan stopped walking. She didn't freeze like a startled animal. She slowed, step by step, until the leash went slack in her hand. Matthew didn't see it. He heard it. The change in rhythm. The absence where her feet should have been. Morrigan? Whitley said softly, the way she did when she didn't want to startle her. Morrigan didn't answer. She tilted her head, listening, not to the world but into it, as if the night was speaking in a language only she could pass. There's something wrong, Morrigan said. Her voice was calm, not scared, observational. Matthew felt the hairs on his arms lift. What kind of wrong? Saoirse asked. Morrigan's fingers tightened in Thor's fur. Pattern wrong. Matthew closed his eyes, the way he always did when he needed to hear better. That was when he noticed it. The cicadas had stopped. Not faded, not thinned, stopped. The silence pressed in, heavy and unnatural, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the night. Even the river breeze had gone still, leaving the air thick and wet against his skin. Thor growled. Low, controlled, nothing playful in it. Matthew reached down automatically, fingers finding the worn leather of the leash. His heart began to beat louder in his ears, and he hated that, hated how his own body could betray him by making noise. What do you hear, baby? Whitley asked Morrigan. Morrigan didn't look at her mother. Her eyes were fixed on something Matthew couldn't see, something ahead of them, down the block where the street lamps broke into long, quiet, uneven pools of light. Someone's walking, Morrigan said. Matthew listened. There it was, not footsteps, dragging, a soft, irregular scrape against brick. Stop. Pause. Scrape again. Too slow to be a jogger, too heavy to be a child. No accompanying breath, no shift of weight the way a healthy body moved. Matthew's stomach tightened. People walk all the time, Whitley said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Morrigan shook her head. Not like that. The sound came closer. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Thor's growl deepened, vibrating through the leash and into Matthew's hand. The dog's body had gone rigid, every muscle pulled tight in a way Matthew recognized. Thor didn't growl at strangers, he growled at threats. Whitley, Matthew said quietly, turn around. She hesitated. He could hear it in her breath. Now, he said, something shifted ahead of them, a wet, choking sound that might have been a cough or might have been laughter. It was impossible to tell. It echoed wrong, bouncing off the narrow street and coming back distorted. Raymond began to fuss, a sharp intake of breath that promised crying. Matthew moved without thinking. He stepped closer to Whitley, resting his hand against the stroller, grounding himself. Hey, buddy, he murmured, voice low and steady. It's okay, Daddy's right here. The dragging sound stopped, the silence stretched. Then, a sudden, frantic burst of movement, footsteps fast and uneven, coming from ahead of them. Not one set, 2, 3, someone screamed. It was cut off too quickly. Thor barked once, sharp and violent, and lunged forward. Back, Whitley said, panic bleeding into her voice now. She spun the stroller around, wheels bumping hard against the curb. Saoirse grabbed Matthew Jr.'s hand. Morrigan didn't move. She was staring frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow. "Morrigan," Matthew said, forcing calm into his voice, "come to me." Another sound joined the night. Tearing fabric, a wet crunch that made Matthew's stomach heave. He couldn't see it, but his mind filled in the gaps with awful clarity. Human sounds. Not anymore. Morrigan stumbled backward into him, and Matthew wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. She was shaking now. "They don't stop," she whispered. "They don't stop when they should." Whitley started running. Matthew ran blind, trusting the map in his head and the pull of his family around him. Brick blurred beneath his feet. Sounds collided, crying, barking, the stroller rattling like it might fall apart at any second. Behind them, something howled. It wasn't pain, it was hunger. The night, once gentle, closed its teeth around Savannah, and the Dyier family ran straight into the dark. They didn't stop running until Whitley nearly tripped over the curb at the corner of Liberty Street. Matthew heard it before he felt it. The sharp hitch in her breath, the sudden stutter in the stroller's wheels. He lunged forward, catching the handle just as it tipped, his knuckles scraping metal. Lilith let out a thin cry, more surprised than frightened, and the sound punched a hole straight through Matthew's chest. "Quiet," Whitley whispered, too sharply, immediately regretful. She bent over the stroller, shielding Lilith with her body, rocking just enough to stop the cry from becoming a scream. Matthew forced his breathing to slow. Listen, map, count, traffic light humming overhead. Power still on. Good, a delivery truck idled somewhere nearby, engine coughing. A man was arguing with someone on a phone 2 houses down. Normal life noises clinging stubbornly to the edges of something very wrong. Thor whined low, pacing tight circles, nails ticking against the pavement. He kept turning his head back the way they'd come, hackles raised. "They're still there," Morrigan said. Matthew felt her words more than he heard them. She wasn't guessing. "Who?" Saoirse asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound grown. "The ones that run when they shouldn't," Morrigan replied. Whitley straightened, wiping sweat from her face with the back of her hand. "We're going home," she said. "No more walks tonight. Home. 4 blocks away. 2 if they cut through the square." Matthew's chest tightened. The square was open. Too open. Sounds traveled there. "Not the square," he said. Whitley hesitated only a second before nodding. "Alley by the church, then." They moved again, slower this time. Purposeful. Matthew took the stroller, letting Whitley walk point. The weight grounded him, gave his hands something solid to trust. Morrigan stayed glued to his side, her fingers clutching his shirt like an anchor. The alley smelled like damp stone and old leaves. Matthew could hear water dripping somewhere, steady, rhythmic. A cat hissed, then vanished. Thor's posture eased just a fraction, but he didn't stop scanning. Halfway through, a new sound joined the night. Metal scraping concrete. Matthew froze. It wasn't behind them, it was ahead. "Stop," he whispered. Whitley stopped. The scraping came again, closer this time, accompanied by a wet, rattling breath that seemed to come from too deep in the chest. No shoes, bare feet slapping softly against stone. Someone or something lurched into the thin spill of light at the far end of the alley. Matthew couldn't see the details, but he didn't need to. The rhythm was wrong, the pauses between steps too long, the breath too thick, like it was drowning on air. "Help," a voice croaked. It sounded like it had been dragged through gravel. Saoirse sucked in a breath. "Daddy, don't answer," Matthew said more sharply than he meant to. His pulse roared in his ears, trying to drown out the world. The figure took another step forward. "Help," it said again, louder now, hungrier. Thor exploded into barking, lunging hard enough to yank the leash from Morrigan's grip. The dog strained forward, snarling, every warning signal screaming danger. The figure responded. It ran. Not fast, not clean, but it ran straight at them, arms jerking, feet slapping wetly against the ground. The breath turned into a scream that wasn't pain or fear, just raw need. Whitley shoved Matthew back. "Turn around." Matthew spun, pushing the stroller ahead of him, his cane clattering uselessly against the wall as he ran by memory alone. The alley narrowed, walls closing in, sounds ricocheting until he couldn't tell where anything was anymore. Behind them, Thor hit the end of the leash and let go. Matthew heard it. The leash snapping free. "No," he breathed. Thor didn't retreat. The dog charged. There was a wet impact, a thud, a snarl that cut off into a choking gurgle. Then another scream, higher, angrier, joined the first. More footsteps. Too many. "They're coming," Morrigan sobbed, finally losing her calm. Matthew burst out of the alley into open street, lungs burning. Whitley grabbed Raymond up into her arms without breaking stride. Saoirse half-dragged Matthew Jr., who was crying now, his small, terrified sobs tearing holes in the night. Behind them, Thor barked again, then yelped. The sound was sharp and sudden and final. Matthew staggered, heart-shattering. He almost turned back. Whitley didn't let him. She seized his wrist, nails biting into his skin. "If you turn around, we all die," she said, voice breaking but firm. The barking stopped, something wet chewed. The howling grew louder. They reached their front porch with lungs on fire and hands shaking. Whitley fumbled with the keys, dropping them once, twice. Matthew stood guard, useless eyes scanning shadows, ears straining for any sign the night had followed them home. The door finally flew open. They tumbled inside, slammed it shut, threw the deadbolt, the chain, the chair under the handle. Silence crashed down on them, heavy and suffocating. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Morrigan whispered, her voice small and broken against Matthew's chest. Thor didn't run. Matthew closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to hers as the house creaked and settled around them. Outside, something scraped against their front door. Slow, patient, hungry. And somewhere in Savannah, the night learned their address. The scrape came again. Slow, deliberate. Matthew stood in the narrow slice of hallway between the living room and the kitchen, one hand braced against the wall, the other gripping the thick wooden staff he kept by the door. It was heavy, oak, worn smooth by years of use, balanced in a way that felt honest in his hands. Not a blade, not a gun. Something that didn't jam or misfire or care if he could see straight. The house held its breath. Whitley stood near the door, feet planted, the 9mm Kimber clutched in both hands. Matthew could hear the faint tremor in her breathing, the way she fought to keep it quiet. She had never liked guns. She had learned anyway. Parenthood had taught her that fear was a luxury. Saoirse crouched behind the couch with Matthew Jr., one arm wrapped around him, the other pressed over his mouth. Raymond whimpered softly against Whitley's shoulder, confused and overtired. Morrigan sat on the floor by Matthew's legs, back straight, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on the door. Lilith slept. That terrified Matthew more than the scraping. Outside, something bumped the doorframe. A wet sound followed, like a face being dragged sideways across painted wood. Matthew counted seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then, a sound he hadn't dared hope for. A whine. Familiar. Pained. Thor. Matthew's heart slammed so hard it stole his breath. He took an involuntary step forward, staff scraping softly against the floor. Whitley heard it too. Her breath hitched. "Thor?" she whispered, the name breaking in half in her mouth. The whine came again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable thump of a body collapsing against the porch. Not the dragging scrape, not the hunger breath, a dog, hurt and scared. "There's something else out there," Saoirse whispered. "I hear it moving." Matthew listened past the pounding of his own pulse. The street beyond their porch was no longer quiet, footsteps unsteady, overlapping. A low animal moan that wasn't Thor, nails scraping brick. "They followed him," Matthew said. Whitley swore under her breath. She stepped back from the door, eyes darting to the window, then to Matthew. "If I open it?" "I know," Matthew said. He tightened his grip on the staff. "I'll cover. Cover." The word tasted like a lie, but it was the best they had. Whitley moved fast. She yanked the door open just enough to slip through, the porch light flaring to life in a harsh white bloom that made Matthew flinch even from inside. The sudden brightness stabbed his eyes, even through the pain filter he'd learned to live with. "Thor!" Whitley hissed. Matthew heard claws scrabble weakly against wood, then the heavy thud of Thor's body being dragged inside. Whitley slammed the door shut again just as something hit it from the other side, hard enough to rattle the frame. Matthew moved on instinct. He swung the staff forward, bracing it against the door just as a second impact came. The wood groaned but held. Old house, solid bones. Whitley dropped to her knees beside Thor. Matthew didn't need to see to know how bad it was. Thor's breathing was ragged, wet in a way that made Matthew's stomach knot. Blood pooled on the hardwood floor, warm and metallic smelling. "Easy, boy," Whitley whispered, hands already working. Easy, I've got you. The scratching started again outside, then pounding, slow fists, patient. They don't care about him, Morrigan said softly. They didn't bite him because they were hungry. They bit him because he was in the way. Matthew swallowed. He didn't ask how she knew. Dad, Saoirse said, they're not leaving. I know, Matthew said. He handed the staff to Saoirse without looking. If anything gets past me, you swing. Hard, don't stop. She took it. He felt the tremor in her hands through the wood. Matthew moved to the hall closet and opened it by touch. His fingers found cold metal, familiar shapes. He pulled free the Lawson 380, checked the weight, the click of the slide telling him it was loaded. Crude. Unreliable. But it would bark when asked. The Remington stayed in the bedroom. Too long, too loud. Not yet. The pounding outside grew more insistent. A voice slithered through the cracks around the door. Open. It sounded wrong, like someone repeating a word they didn't understand. Matthew raised the pistol, aiming not with sight but with memory. Doorframe height, chest level. His finger rested on the trigger, not pulling. Waiting. Thor growled. It was weak, but it was there. Matthew almost laughed from relief. They didn't change him, Whitley said, voice shaking as she pressed a towel hard against Thor's side. They didn't, thank God, they didn't change him. Matthew nodded once. The relief didn't make him feel better. It made him afraid, because it meant the world had decided animals weren't part of whatever this was, only people. Outside, the pounding stopped. Silence settled again, thick and listening. Matthew didn't lower the gun. He knew better now. They lived at 2023 West 38th Street, just off Ogeechee. A good house, a loud street, too close to everything. The night hadn't just found them, it had marked them, and somewhere beyond their door something waited, patient enough to learn. End of chapter 1.